In your system setup, you have several options here. These you're probably not going to be using a whole lot, but I'll show you what they do. In your word clock setup, you can choose the sample rate of the console. You have 48K, 44.1, and word clock in as your three options here. These top two are internal clock rates, which just mean it's the console's clock, so it's not looking outside the console for its clock rate. The word clock in would reference the B and C word clock in on the back of the console, so you can have something like a Big Ben or a Lucid clock in the console, and this actually does make a pretty big difference in this console and really improves the sound quality. If you have cards in your slots, you can also choose to clock to those inputs or those cards doing this. And then same stuff down here. This is all options for your slots, the card slots that we don't have any of. Next option is cascading. This is so that you can connect two consoles, two M7CLs, and then you can patch inputs and outputs using this menu. So you can have mix one, and you can click here and you tell it what slot to pull in from. So if you select slot 1, then whatever's coming in slot 1 of slot 1, which would be basically input 1 of whatever's in slot 1, would go to mix 1 at that point, and so on and so forth. And then your output patch too, you can send your mix 1 out of slot 1 and slot 1 on slot 1, which is kind of confusing, but it's really just output 1 of slot 1, and that would go to the second console. So that's what this is for, if you're cascading consoles. Alright, then you have your out port setup. This allows you to add delay, and you can also invert the polarity here, and you have an attenuation knob for your outputs. So you have your omni outs 1 through 8, 9 through 16 here. You also have your slot outs if you're using the extra slots on the console. So this is useful. Sometimes you might want to delay a backfill in the room, or even a control room feed, or if you're feeding maybe your hallways and you want to delay them, this is a great place to do that. You can change your delay units here to meters, feet, samples, or milliseconds. So this can be really useful. For instance, if you have maybe some hallway speakers or even a delay speaker in the room, and you know how many feet it is from your main PA to that secondary speaker, just put it on feet, and then when you turn up your delay here, it's measuring it in feet, 120 feet, and then it even tells you at the top is 106 milliseconds of delay. So that's really useful, and it'll always tell you milliseconds above the knob, but when you change the delay scale, it just changes what is below the knob here. So it can go samples, and then if you change it to milliseconds, then those values match. So pretty useful little feature there. And you also have to make sure that you turn the delay on. If that's not on, then this value is not doing anything. So you can quickly turn that feature on and off by doing that. You can also change your patching from here, so you can tell it what output you want it to go to from this window. The next window is your MIDI window, and this just allows you to change the MIDI settings on the console. This console can do a lot with MIDI, and that gets pretty complicated, so really the best thing to do here is dig into the manual if you're wanting to do a lot of this MIDI stuff. And this also has a lot to do with the networking of the console, because it's using MIDI to actually control all the settings in the console. Now, 48 volt master, your phantom power. This does not turn phantom power on and off for all channels. What it does is basically enables phantom power. So if this is off, then you can't turn phantom power on for any channel. If you turn it on here, this allows you to turn phantom power on individual channels, but it does not automatically turn phantom power on for all channels, so don't get that confused. It's just kind of enabling, disabling phantom power, and when that's useful is if you have a front of house desk and a monitor desk, and you only want one console to be able to send phantom power, you would just disable phantom power on whichever console you don't want sending phantom power, and this would prevent any mistakes. The next menu is bus setup. This is a really useful menu. It allows you to configure all your buses, so your mixes. If you're using this for in-ears and you have stereo in-ears, then you might make mix 1 and 2 into a stereo mix, which pairs them together and lets you pan in between them. Or if you need two mono mixes, then you would do this. Then you have your pickoff point here. So you can have it pre-EQ, pre-fader, which would be post-EQ, and then fixed. You notice that these both say variable above them. So that means that this mix functions like an aux, where you can turn each channel up and down in that mix. So variable pre-EQ, variable pre-fader, but then you have fixed. What this does is makes that mix function more like a subgroup, where if you turn it on in that mix, then it's at unity. You can't control the actual level of the channel going to that mix. So that's useful if you want to do some bus compression or something like that, where you don't really want to use it as an aux mix necessarily. You just want it to be at unity, but it is post fader at that point. So if you pull the fader up and down, it controls the level going to that mix. You can do the same with your matrix bus setup. You can do a stereo matrix or a mono matrix. When you do stereo too, another thing you'll notice is pan link over here, and this just links the pan on the mix. The other thing you have, you can do pre-EQ or pre-fader on this. You cannot treat this like an audio subgroup like you can your normal mixes. So, but you can choose pre-EQ or pre-fader, which would be post-EQ in that case. Down at the bottom of the screen here, you have console lock, where you can lock your console out, and you have to use your password to get back into the console. Here you have your date and time settings, which are pretty straightforward. You can set your date and your time, and you can change the formatting if you want month, day, year, or day, month, year, or if you want the year first. And you can change your hour mode too if you want a 12-hour or a 24-hour clock. So you also have network settings. This is where you set your IP address, your subnet mask, and your gateway. And you can also get the MAC address from here and change the type of network that you're on. So that's there if you want to network your console. And then here you have your brightness controls. These are really useful. You can turn your screen brightness up and down, the panel brightness, which is your on lights, select lights, Q lights, and your LED meters. You also have your lamp light level to turn that up and down. Now this is kind of cool. You can have presets here. So if bank A and B are really just brightness presets, so that can be really good. You know, if you want to turn everything down during a dark part of your service, where the house lights are down, so you're not glowing so bright. But then maybe there's another part where you want everything up, so you can quickly change between a bright and a dark setting here. Pretty useful there.